Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Social Work Radio with me, your host Vince Peart. Once again we are joined by our co-host Tilly Baden. Tilly, my friend, on last week's episode we had been busy discussing ethical dilemmas. We've not got quite as juicy a topic this week, but hopefully it'll be good for you. It's all about social work stress. I'm just going to jump straight into this one today, actually, like we did last week. Do you find much stress in social work?
Absolutely, yes.
Right, there we go. Until next week, it's goodbye from me. No. See, on a serious note, so basically, listeners, the reason I want to discuss this is over the course of February, so over the course of last month, we quite often run quite a few stories on stress over at mysocialworknews.com, given, sadly, as I'm sure we'll end up discussing at length, Tilly, it is a significant byproduct of the work we do. There's a few articles that I wrote. One was a part of my social work supervision at the start of February. That was essentially someone had contacted me saying how she'd been wiped out. And since Christmas, she's been getting tired most afternoons. By the time she gets home, she's totally wiped out and quite moody. She says she's been finding it hard to lose her extra Christmas weight this year. She doesn't want to continue because she loves her job. She's done it for 6 years. So I wrote a piece essentially explaining, well, actually, it might be signs that you've got a lot of cortisol in your body because the stress hormone cortisol can bring up a lot of stress issues, which can be linked to poor sleep, poor diet, difficulties gaining weight or losing weight, difficulty in essential weight regulation, however you want to spin that one, and however it's relevant to your body image and your body weight ideals. Middle of the month, I wrote an article. This was one of my own columns, and it was essentially recalling some advice that I'd given to a friend about the boredom that she was feeling as potentially a sign of safety. A good friend of mine she's been a social worker 6 years. She's left one job. Well, she's kind of always been in safeguarding, a couple of different local authorities, but always done frontline child protection. She left that job and gone to a non-case holding position around November time, so about 4 months ago. And she said to me, Vince, I'm really, really bored. I'm missing. I was like, are you bored or are you just safe? And again, that's like the Vince show. This another article that I've written, and the last one I wrote on Valentine's Day, actually, February 14th, was how to stop feeling overwhelmed in social work. And I gave some tips for those who may be still living with the high cortisol of the toxic workplace and who may be, having signs of significant stress. So I wrote those 3 articles and I thought, let's talk about this today, because we do talk about stress quite a lot, but we don't necessarily talk about how to deal with them. So today's topic is social work stress and how to reduce it. So what are your symptoms of stress and how do you cope with them when you are stressed out? Not by me.
Oh, no. Other social work things that stress me out. The first symptom I notice is feeling overwhelmed by things. I suddenly can't.
I've got some tips about how to deal with that coming up later. So you're in the right place.
Solve all my problems for me, please.
I'll try.
Yeah, so feeling like I can't get on top of my to-do list, not being particularly productive, flitting between loads of different things and not really getting anything done. They're like my early warning signs. They're normally quite short term. I'm normally able to stop it it normally just takes a day or so just to pause and recalibrate and just work out, right, what am I doing? What are my priorities? What can wait? And set some time aside. Try and do a bit more like you do, being a bit more organised and putting it in my diary. But from a sort of a longer term stress, I know I'm starting to dip when, firstly, I notice I lose energy. I don't get so excited by things. I just want to go back home and go to bed. Crux on junk food. That's a big crux for me. And my pain levels go up. So I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the podcast, but so I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Gosh, how many years ago now? Quite a few years ago, maybe 7 years ago. And it's very well managed, but I can tell when I'm going through a period of stress because then my pain levels increase and it's just constant joint pain, constant tiredness, constant brain fog. And then I need some time to just relax, chill out, recover, and then I'm back on it again. But so yeah, that's then personally for me, that's a big warning sign that I'm feeling stressed, because normally that's what triggers it in the first place.
Just come back to something you said there, Tilly, about writing it down. Are you aware of Kydland's law?
I feel like I've heard of it, but refresh my memory.
So Kydland's law is founded on the principle that any problem, when divided and examined in smaller, more manageable components, becomes half as complex and overwhelming. Essentially, if you write down a problem, it vanishes by half.
Oh.
So, you said there about earlier, if you write down your problems and manage them, think about Kydland's law. To reference myself again,
of course.
I wrote a social work skills article on this in December. So, listeners, if you want to check out Kydland's law, head over to mysocialworknews.com.
That's where I've heard it from. I've read your article before.
Head over to mysocialworknews.com and just search Kydland's law, or check out the social work skills catalogue, library of articles on there. So yeah, that is probably why that is helpful for you. I feel very much the same as you on certain things. I mean, I haven't got fibromyalgia. My brother Ethan does. He suffered with it for over 10 years now. At first, I didn't know what it was because it's so linked. It comes and goes. No obvious symptoms. Doctors couldn't identify anything. And as I'm sure you know yourself, it has only been a relatively recent discovery in terms of professionals kind of grasp a lot. We'll not stress you about talking about doctors again. We had that a few weeks ago on the podcast.
They're not my favourite profession at the moment. Sorry.
So, I mean, look, my symptoms generally tend to be, when I'm stressed, denial. Denying that I am stressed. That's
okay.
When people are asking me, are you stressed? And I'm saying, no, but it's obvious I am. It's because I don't don't give me any attention. I don't like that. I don't want the attention from people when I'm feeling weak and vulnerable. So it's usually a denial of it. Then it'll be difficulty sleeping. I get spasms in my eye, particularly in the left eyelid. Spasms, that's a big sign for me. It's got little eyelid twitches. I can have stomach problems. I do have a hiatus hernia, so I've got a management diet anyway. How restricted my diet is. I don't eat any processed food. I don't eat wheat. I don't eat dairy. I don't drink. Some of those things are lifestyle choices. Some are for my general health. Some are to manage my hiatus hernia. But I have stomach problems, but I crave junk food, which makes my stomach problems worse. It's like a vicious cycle. Yeah. My stomach problem's bad, and it gets stressed, and I used to think that my head and my stomach were two very different things. When you look at the science of it, your stomach's got the second most nerve endings in the body. A lot of people refer to it as the second brain. So they have stomach problems, they have stomach cramps, they find it difficult to sleep. And I occasionally just get feelings of overwhelm. Very, very limited. This maybe happens 1 or 2 times a year, but I just feel that everything's getting on top of me. I've taken on too much. And I blame myself. I always blame myself. I've taken on too much. I've put too much pressure on myself. I've taken on too much work. I've set myself too many goals, and I'm taking on too much at once. And I think, if only I had a simpler life. And that's when I pine for a 9-to-5 job, stacking shelves at my local Aldi.
Yeah.
That's what I pine for, I think. Because I hark back to a time when my life was simple. I never stacked shelves. I don't work in a supermarket, but I have had straightforward jobs that, like when I worked in a bar, when I worked on my dad's coal wagon, when I was a builder, when I was a careers advisor, when I was a youth worker, even though I was client-facing, I knew when I was coming and going. And my work began and ended when I entered and left that place of work. Or when I was with my father, travelling around with the coal wagon, when I entered and left the coal wagon as we were delivering coal. I pine for jobs like that. Now, the vast majority of the time, I love my job and I adore it, but there's times where I think, I've already had a simpler life. And that's what I pine for, simplicity. Now, I end up beating myself even more. I don't know if you do this, but when I get stressed, I can sometimes make my stress worse by saying to myself, Vince, bloody hell, you knew this was coming. You've been here before. Why have you done it to yourself? Because I get like a false sense of hope. I get stressed and I think, right, I'm going to make these changes. And I do make these changes. I eat healthier. I sleep better. I become more regimented. I stop saying yes to so much work. And I calm down, and then that manages fine for 6 months, and it reaches a crescendo. Literally, usually that's about a day or two. Like, I've taken on too much, don't do it. And then it goes away, and I build myself up again. So those are my main sort of symptoms of stress. As for how I deal with them, I deal with them a lot better than I used to. I used to deal with them just purely by denial. My stress in the past was just I'm not stressed at all. I was weak. My way of dealing with stress was saying I was weak. I'm not a man. I'm not strong enough to handle this. Nobody cares. Think of what I used to compare myself unfairly to other people. Think about people that are fighting wars. I shouldn't be stressed. Look what I've got. I did. I used to, because I didn't look at my stress relatively and comparatively. I didn't see it in the context of my own life. I compared myself unfavorably to people, friends, family members, my dad, other people. I think, they wouldn't. I can't acknowledge my stress because other people have got far worse. And that helps a little bit. It helps, but don't make it go away. So what I've learned now is to actually tackle that stress, give myself time in my diary where I don't do anything. Just give myself time. Have a nice bath, put some Epsom salts in, go to bed nice and early, play a computer game, read a book, see friends and family, tell people how I'm feeling, eat a healthy meal. Sometimes I'll fast for 24 hours. Sometimes I've eaten rubbish food. I think, right, I'm not going to eat anything for 24 hours. Give my body a reset, go for a nice walk, do some meditation. All those things that I used to be told that were the ways of dealing with stress, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go around the pub instead. They actually do work. So I listened to the science. I followed the science. It's like an old COVID saying that, isn't it? Follow the science. I used to be scared about asking for help. When you get stressed, Tilly, do you deal with it yourself or do you seek support from other people?
Oh, I deal with it myself.
Of
course I do.
I used to be like that. I used to be like that. It wasn't good for me.
I pride myself on being self-sufficient. I find it really hard to reach out. The more stressed I am, the more closed off I get. And actually, in some ways, that can reset my stress because I am an introverted person, as we discovered a few weeks ago on the podcast when we did personality types. Actually,
well, you say you are, but are you? I'm not sure you are, Tilly.
No, I am. I am.
Would an introvert come on the podcast and talk like this?
But it doesn't matter. It's about how you recharge.
Would an introvert want to go along to universities and stand in front of hundreds of students and teach them? Introverts
doesn't mean that you're a hermit.
No. I know what introverts mean.
It's about how you recharge and how
it's not
ground and
but
where you feel most comfortable. I'm most comfortable on my own.
But to me, you have extroverted traits significantly.
I do.
Because when I think about introverts, when I think about, maybe I have this wrong. When I think about introverted people, they are people who maybe would feel very uncomfortable coming on a podcast every week and discussing their views to thousands of people. I think about people who would be uncomfortable getting up and presenting themselves in that position.
Yeah, but I am uncomfortable with people I don't know.
But you speak to thousands of people.
Yeah, but that's easy. And you know a lot of people that are working those like comedians, musicians, people that stand up on stage are often the quietest, shyest people out there. They just are able to put on a persona, stand up, do what they're doing. And if you put me on a stage and ask me to talk about something that I have no knowledge of, absolutely terrified.
Everybody would be, though. Everybody would be.
If you said, stand up and tell jokes or something, oh my God, I'd be terrified. I can talk about social work and mental capacity and law because that excites me and I'm knowledgeable about it. So it's in my comfort zone.
So extroverted on the stage, introverted at home.
Yeah. And you see the more extroverted side of me because we know each other so well.
So introverted with strangers.
I am, if I walk into a crowded room or a party and I don't know people, I'm at the edge of that room. I do not want to talk to other people. I will sit there just trying to make myself as small as possible.
I'll not remind you how you were acting at the Social Worker of the Year Awards then. Let's quickly move on. Let's swiftly move on before I dismantle Tilly's introverted idea of herself. Don't match up with the Tilly I know.
I was drunk.
Don't match up with the Tilly I know. Right. But when you're stressed though, you hide away. Yeah. Not in a bad way, but you start going to one show.
Yeah.
I used to, but now I've learned that wasn't really helping me that much.
No.
Maybe times that I do, but like I sometimes think I'm at my worst when I'm by myself.
Yeah.
Like I like to be around people, whether it's my friends, whether it's my family, whether it's my girlfriend, whether it's my children. I'm at my best when I'm around people. If I'm left alone, I'm getting used to being by myself, but I don't like it, and so. Usually, if I'm withdrawing into myself, it's in a bad place. I'm in a bad place. If I'm not speaking to people, things aren't going that well. Because usually I would always actively seek people's company if I had the option. But sometimes you've got to be by yourself, and that's the way it is. But like, I live alone at the moment, but that wouldn't necessarily be by choice, if you know what I mean. That wouldn't be my priority. It'd never be my priority. So I've learned over time, actually, because I used to want people's company, but when I was feeling weak and when I was stressed and when I was vulnerable, I would hide from it. And that was the opposite route. That was the exact opposite of what I should be doing, because people being around people recharges me. It's what I usually seek. So I've learned, actually, what I learned was a massive, massive change from me. I learned this from my friend, Dr. Price. What I learned was that I learned it myself, but through talking to her, she helped. I used to think that showing my vulnerability to people was a sign of weakness. What I've realised is actually a sign of strength. Because if you're strong enough to say, I need a bit of help, but if you're strong enough to say, I'm not doing so well, the weakness isn't hiding. The weakness isn't hiding your weakness. Because if you've got to hide who you are, it means you're weak. If you can be strong, you can be open. So my coping strategies, some things by myself, but now also involve getting support from others. Let's talk about our work then. I've been a social worker 11 years now. You've been a social worker 9 years?
Something like that. I don't know.
I'm ticking my days off. I'm ticking my...
it is 9 years.
It's been 9 years, I've been 11 years. So in my 11 years of a social worker, there have been many times when I've been stressed. When are you most stressed by your job? If I was to say to you, in those 9 years, what have been the most stressful times? Potentially recurring times that come up more than others, times that our listeners may be familiar with. What stresses you out more than anything? And are these regular things, and how do you handle them when they come along?
So my first year in child protection was the most stressful time of my life. Hardly surprising.
11 years of
Hardly surprising. I just was stressed the entire time. And it took me a good sort of 3 or 4 months after I left that job to be able to sleep through the night and not have that panic. I used to, every time I'd go into the shops in my local town, I'd be thinking, oh my God, I'm going to bump into someone that I've just removed their children. Or it was constant. It was probably some form of PTSD that never got diagnosed. Yeah. It
would have been 50% of social workers suffer vicarious trauma by PTSD.
Yeah. And the article that you wrote recently really resonated me about getting on board, because I moved into adult services, and I remember that first job I felt really bored. And it wasn't. It was safety. It was, my caseload, if it's always high, and I had complex cases, but it was nothing compared to how it was in child protection. So that was obviously a really stressful time. I think the more experienced you get and the more comfortable you get as a social worker, and you can rely on your knowledge base and your skills and your background, that no matter what you face, you're going to know how to work through it. That reduces a huge amount of stress.
Could you go back at the children's now and not feel the stress then?
Oh, no, I wouldn't want to. You couldn't pay me all the money in the world. I would rather go and stack shelves in the supermarket than go back and be a child protection social worker.
So you'd rather do that. You hate my job.
I would. I would absolutely hate it. I could not do it. I take my hat off to all the child protection social workers out there.
I appreciate that. I have to me.
I couldn't personally do it again.
No.
It didn't excite me in the way that my job now excites me. I love learning about Mental Capacity Act and advocating for human rights and personalisation and empowerment and all these things that come with my job now. Being a safeguarding statutory child protection social worker just doesn't really fit with the areas that interest me. Don't get me wrong, I don't want children to be harmed or anything like that, but it's not something that excites me personally. There are better people out there to do the job than I could.
I like the fact that you felt the need to clarify that you don't want children to be harmed.
We live in a cancel culture. I just want to make it very clear.
That isn't a question I was asking. I'd be pretty surprised if any of your listeners or viewers were thinking, well, because she doesn't want to do that job, she wants children to be hurt. But, Thank you
for clarifying.
Thank you for clarifying of something that we didn't need clarifying. In terms of when I'm most stressed, it's different to you because you said there, you gave an example of what would have stressed you out was meeting a client whose children you'd been involved in removing from their care.
Mm-hmm.
That never used to stress me out. And it still doesn't to this day. That doesn't worry me. It's not because it isn't a tragic thing. It is a tragic thing. But if that happens, and I have to just accept that is the byproduct of my work. It's the reason why I would never do my job where I lived.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in Gateshead, which is near Newcastle upon Tyne. For those who aren't as familiar with the geography, they may have heard of Newcastle, but not Gateshead. I worked there for a year, but when my wife at the time became pregnant with our first child, I left my job because I realised it was unfair on her, it was unfair on my children, it was also unfair on the other families. Imagine if I'd been a social worker for a family where the mum or dad had shared horrific times with me, but they'd gone ahead and improved their life and wanted to leave that behind. And yet our children end up at the same school. Just very, very difficult for them indeed. So no, I would never do like I know some people who've done their job where they lived their entire year. A good friend of mine, Louise, she's done her job in the town that she grew up and lived within her entire life. And she lives in that town. It's a relatively small town. She doesn't see that being problematic, but I just couldn't. It's a personal choice. When I felt more stress has been with paperwork. It genuinely, it's very, look, if I have to deal with a stressful situation with a client, if I have to remove a children from a parent's care on an emergency basis, if I have to share difficult news with a client, God forbid, many years ago now, I was the social worker of a child who ended up in a very, very difficult situation. That was stressful. And that's just one in particular that comes to mind. But I've been in lots of situations like that, but one's just come to mind then. That's stressful and that's difficult, but that's the job. The job involves dealing with those things. That's the work. The stress that has got me is the artificial stress that we as social workers put on ourselves within the system. That you're given 15 different priorities at the same day. We need your chronologies up to date. We need your paperwork up to date. We need those case recording. We need those 4 visits doing because, somebody else didn't do it. You've got a duty call to cover for somebody else. You've got to do a contact supervision for a family because the contact supervisor's dropped out and it's court ordered. Or can you take a student out on a visit because they need some experience? By the way, can you step in and can you chair this meeting on me? And you've still got your normal work to do above that. Oh, wow, that's the stress for me. It's all those competing demands because it's, well, okay, tell me which to do. And then that whatever you prioritise, you're letting other people down. The stress for me that comes in social work isn't the nature of the job because we know we're going to deal with difficult situations. That's the job. That's what we came in to do. The stress for me is knowing you want to get there but being here. And know you can't get there. That's stress. If there's things that I can do within my power, I'm not stressed by it. Yeah, I feel a bit of pressure, but that's good. That's positive. That's a motivation to make a change and to do something good. The stress that I have felt most, and luckily I haven't been significantly stressed in my career for many years now, because as you were saying earlier, you just get used to it. The stress that I have felt worse in my social work career has been when I've had too much and I've known something's got to give.
Yep.
And it's not going to be me. And that's the thing here. It used to be me when I first started out before I had children. I would work 12-hour days. I'd be 7 till 7 every day because I felt that's what you had to do to prove you were a good social worker. Routine 60-hour weeks was the norm, and I was paid for 40 of those hours. When I had children, I couldn't do that anymore because I had a responsibility bigger than me. I couldn't not be there to pick the kids up from school. I couldn't not be there for bedtime. I couldn't not be there in the morning to get them up. I just had to be. That's when the stress bit, because that's when it was like, I've got a dilemma here. Like we were talking about on last week's show about the ethical dilemmas. I've got a choice here. That's when I've been more stressed. And it's a sad stress now because it's an unnecessary stress.
Yeah, it is.
Because if all you were given a reasonable caseload, you wouldn't be in that position. And I think the vast majority of social workers, and we were talking about this on the other social work podcast a couple of weeks back, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about this on Social Work Radio. In relation to those burnout rates, what can we do to improve retention? Most people who leave the profession are because they can't do the job that they wanted to do. So that's when I felt most stress. Yeah. In terms of what I can do about it, I've left jobs before, to be perfectly honest.
Just leave. Give up.
No, don't give up.
No, I'm joking.
I'm being silly there. Yeah, but you are. Don't give up the profession, but you did it, Tilly. You did it.
Yeah.
You're the perfect example of what you can do, which is find a different position. So you were very, very stressed in children's work. You found a different position in adults and you thrived. And that's what people should do. Find something that works. It might work the other way around. People might find adults stressful, but don't find the job that's right for you. Social work is so multifaceted and so varied, you'll definitely find it. Now, should we accept that social work is just stressful? Because what I've said there kind of says, well, do you know what? Social work is stressful. Some jobs will always be stressful. There's not much you can do about it. Yes, you can maybe change for different positions in terms of the paperwork, but in terms of the actual day-to-day work of dealing with clients in difficult positions, that's what social work is. Mm-hmm. Should we accept that social work will always be stressful and that's just the life that we lead in our profession?
I think there should always be some stress that comes with it in terms of we're making such huge decisions about people's lives. And actually, if it didn't feel some sort of tug on you, mm-hmm. then actually that's quite a dangerous place to be. We're making life and death decisions. Our choices and the way that we practice mm-hmm. is going to significantly impact on multiple people's lives. And if you don't take that responsibility seriously and give it enough weight, then that's a dangerous place to practice.
So you need that stress to motivate you in a certain aspect.
It's hard because it's not necessarily, you don't want stress, but you need that gravity, that weight. You need to care, exactly. What you don't need is the unnecessary stuff that comes with it. And actually, we know that some organisations are better than others, some teams are better than others, managers are better than others. Mm-hmm. And if you can find the right position to be in where you are the least stressed, mm-hmm. do that. It shouldn't be inevitable that it has any impact on your personal health and your life mm-hmm. and everything. It needs to be manageable. A bit of stress can be good. It can cause you to make positive changes in your life. It can
that's the science. Stress is telling us to do something.
Yeah, exactly. It can push you down a healthier lifestyle. If it doesn't, then that's bad stress and that needs to change. There's a balance.
So what you said earlier in terms of management and organisation, you said that just a minute mm-hmm. or so ago. Where does that line come between our employers having the responsibility to manage our stress and it being on us to manage our stress? And the reason I ask this is, in particular, obviously, you're a manager now, I've been a manager in the past. I can give 2 social workers the exact same caseload. Mm. Those social workers could even have the exact same responsibility out of work. But one will be able to handle the stress that comes with that caseload in a very different way to the other person.
Yeah.
So as an employer, what can I do? Maybe very little in that situation. But equally, you could say maybe I could, because I could actually give one social worker more challenging cases because I think they can handle it better. And then it's a bit of an ethical dilemma like we were talking about last week.
Yeah, it is.
But essentially, so where does the line draw? Where's the line drawn between actually saying, well, this is on you. Your social work is going to be stressful. You've got to deal with it as an individual. Well, actually, our employers need to do more. Where's that line drawn?
Well, there's no straightforward answer. Of course there's not.
Try and give me one. Try and give me an answer.
I think all social workers have a personal responsibility mm-hmm. to be as resilient as they can be and to practice things like self-care and manage their own caseloads and lives in a way that is the best way for them. Mm-hmm. We all do that differently, but what works for you, you need to find the way that works for you and do that. It's not solely our organisation's responsibility or our manager's responsibility to micromanage every part of our social work lives or our personal lives. Like you've got to be able to function in some sort of, high-powered job. We're in a very powerful position as social workers, and we need to be able to live with that. And if you can't live with that pressure, then maybe social work isn't for you.
I felt like there. I felt like you were my manager, and you've just said to me, I had a vision there. I'm sat before you, tell you I'm struggling, mate. If you can't cope with me, that isn't for you. Let me go. You're letting me go, aren't
you?
Bye. You let me go. Have I been fired?
Yeah, of course you're fired. Get out.
Where's my union rep? She's bullied me. You've bullied me. I'd say you bullied me.
I think you bully me more than I bully you.
There's evidence.
There's video evidence now.
Catalogue of 64 hours plus of this treatment. So, right, but okay, so there is a line.
There is some personal responsibility.
What more can our employers do? Where does the line come for a duty of care to our social workers if we're an organisation?
So the system pressures have to sit on senior management director level.
Which gives them stress. That's pressure for them.
It does. And actually that needs to go.
Figures?
Yes. It should never... Individual social workers that are practicing on the front line should not be or feel responsible for system failures and our lack of resources. So it is not your individual fault that there's a waiting list of 100 people that need to be seen and there's only one social worker out there to do the job. That is an impossible situation to put any person in.
Do we measure those metrics though? Because in terms of when you look at what senior figures in social work will see and what we can access in terms of a national level, in terms of data and research from universities, Office of National Statistics, gov.uk and so on. You've got seen variables that we can all see. We can all see how many cases a social worker's got. We can all see the vacancy rate. Again, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, 20% vacancy rate in children's social work, about 12% in adult social work. We can see the wage people are on, we can see sickness rates, we can see studies. Those are obvious variables.
Yeah.
We don't see the hidden variables, which is quality of life.
No.
Which is a social worker stress level who's managing the job.
Yeah.
We don't see those. So it's difficult, isn't it? Because as an organisation, you can say, right, well, actually, everyone's already got 20 cases. We're doing our bit. But then again, you've got those social workers who are struggling, but others aren't. So, I mean, there's no answer to that. I'm just saying it's difficult, because we have to accept the seen variables, but there's also hidden variables, and those differ person by person, don't they?
They do. And you could have a caseload of 20 or 15 or even 10, but those cases could be the most horrific circumstances and cause you so much work. One person on your caseload can take up a whole week.
I don't like that argument. I'll tell you why. I don't like that argument. I mean, you're not saying it in this context, but I want to point this out because many times I have argued for there needs to be a statutory cap on caseloads for children's social workers. And I think it should be 18. That's my view. I think 18 is about right. All the time you get some smart arse will come back. Oh, but every case, yes, we know that's the case. But every case would be different. You could have 18 that are all stressful. Yes, we know that's the case. But if I've got 8, I'd rather know that if all my cases are stressful, at least I've got a maximum limit of 18 rather than a maximum limit of 30. So people giving that argument, and I know you're not doing it, but I get it all the time. I was being my bonnet that I get. People giving that argument think they're so very clever making that point. Well, no S, Sherlock. Of course, that's obvious. That goes without saying. The point is, though, is we need a cap. But that's a different argument entirely. Our employees need to do more, though. What can they do?
They need to continue to fight for more resources and campaign the government for more resources that then can ease some of these system pressures.
Give me something specific. That sounds like business talk. You know I hate business talk. Give me something specific.
I'm too much of a politician. Of course I am.
Just business. You're just giving out vague words there. You're not giving me any tangible things.
Come on,
Campaign you go first. Campaign the government.
All right, you go first then.
All right, I will. So in terms of specific things that our employers could do, I think if the government aren't going to introduce caseload caps, we need to do it in terms of on an individual basis by basis. So this local authority will not allocate more than 20 cases. Just can't. We'll find other ways to do it. I think that in children's social work, we have too many cases that are open far too long. We have too many children that are known as social workers far too long. And the reason we have this is we stick to these cycles of timescales, which is 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. So particularly if you look at children on child protection plans, well, we have a 6-month review cycle. And you have so many times that those plans are kept open because one professional in the core group Maybe a teacher, maybe a doctor, maybe a nurse, could be a health visitor, could be a midwife, is saying, no, I'm voting against it, I'm voting against it, I'm voting against it. And sometimes the independent reviewing officer will say, no, this case shouldn't be closed, even though they'll only see the family once every 6 months. I think the current procedural systems within child protection social work, and I'm going to get very specific here, so our listeners who aren't in children's and who aren't in the UK may be a bit lost on this one, but you may have comparable systems in your own practice. So we have a system that is very much based upon timelines. We have to stay involved for 3 months. We have to stay involved for 6 months. And we also have a system that is based on national legislation. So in my work, it's the Children Act, and then working together as the Children Act legislation, working together as a guidance. Those are the two sort of pillars that hold up child protection social work. Now, those things are very regimented and very prescriptive. They leave very, very little scope for innovation. And as well as that, we have a system which is very much predicated on setting a child's course through safeguarding based upon the view of the person at the front door. So when that referral first comes in, what does that initial social worker say? Is that a risk? Is it not a case? Then it goes to a duty and assessment team. They'll hold it for 8 weeks. And then if it passes those two gates, so if it passes the threshold for intervention by a triage worker who takes the initial referral, then it passes that 8 weeks when it's held by a duty worker or assessment worker, however you want to call that front door system. That child then enters the safeguarding system. If it's in a child protection plan, it could be for an average of 1.5 years. That's 1.5 years over intervention, which could be, a domestic abuse incident in the family home. I'm not downplaying that, but we sometimes wait 4, 5, 6, 7 months until we're measuring the success of that outcome. We need to get in there early. We need to get in there quicker. We need to get in there faster. We need to really rip up the system in terms of how it's done. It's too long, it's too unwieldy, and the support comes too far down the line. In child protection social work, we are spending hundreds of millions, billions of pounds on children who are in court proceedings and subject to care proceedings and children who are in care. We don't spend anywhere near enough at the early stage. We need to be damming these problems upstream rather than wait until the downstream and it's too late to do anything else but throw thousands and thousands of pounds at these families on a weekly basis. We end up in bizarre situations in child protection social work. And bizarre may not be the most appropriate word, but it's the best one I can think of right now. And it's certainly no slur on the children and families that I'm talking about here. It's just a situation that I find bizarre, not the families that have to live within this and the social workers and professionals that are having to work with it. We have these bizarre, tragic situations where we can be spending sometimes £10,000 a week on a child in a placement. Yet we didn't spend anything at all. We were struggling to even give that family £10 for gas when the mum was saying, I need £10 on the gas meter. So we have families that we wouldn't give anything at all to apart from maybe a food bank voucher when the children were in their care. But when children are out of their care, we will spend hundreds of pounds an hour on barristers. We will spend thousands and thousands of pounds a week on placements in private children's homes. And yet, for the sake of maybe a few £100 or a few £1,000 further upstream. So it's a bizarre situation. And then what happens when these children turn 18 that we've cared so much of the care system?
Bye.
18. Exactly. So we've when you think about it, like, isn't it? Look, I'm not giving exact examples, listeners and viewers, but we can be in situations. I'm sure everyone who's worked in my line of work, and you'll see in this too, Tilly, would be familiar with similar situations. We have situations where we're taking maybe teenage children maybe 10, 11, 12, 13, out of family homes because we're saying there it's such a risk. Okay, we haven't put any money into that family home to start with. We've just said, well, go and do this course, go and do that course, stop doing what you're doing or else. We then take these children from families that they don't want to leave, place them in care systems, often private care homes that cost thousands and thousands of pounds a week. We then see them through till 18. At 18, we go, oh, well, crack on now, you're an adult, do what you like, there's adult services. And where do these children go? Back to the very same homes and very same families we've deemed were unsafe. Now we've potentially spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds in that period. And what effect came about? Now, look, we have protected the child, don't get me wrong. We've done that. In the here and now, we've done the right thing. But that's in the here and now. By the time it gets to the decision of can you do the right thing, the years and years and years of early intervention where you could have gotten there and had intervention in schools, interventions at youth clubs. We've neglected to do that. And it kind of comes to that ethical dilemma here, because we've allowed people to make your own decisions. You can live and die by your own mistakes. It's not on the state to raise your kids. Then it does become on the state to raise the kids, actually. That's the problem. By us staying, it's not on the state to raise your kids and tell you how to act as parents. Well, actually, when it becomes a safeguarding issue, it does become exactly that. So that, for me, what could we do to reduce stress in the workplace would be to simply, change the system. And that is it allows social workers to innovate, get rid of these arbitrary timescales, actually free us up to do the work that matters, and make sure we do that earlier. Get that early intervention in, and you will see social workers freed up to do the job that we would like to. Give us more specific training, give us more specific skills, allow us to specialise in our fields. Actually just have someone come along and actually do something tangible, and not just give generic answers like, we call on the government for action. No, the answers shouldn't come from the government. It should come from us ourselves. We need to start innovating. We need to be freed up to do that. And I think that would solve most of our problems.
Yeah, but the government still write the law.
Yeah, but they write the law. Yeah, they write the law.
And give money to local authorities.
Yes, they do, but it's based upon us to give answers. If you want somebody to do something, what do? Do you go to them with problems, or do you go to them with answers?
Yeah, solutions.
You got them. So if I'm coming to you, you're my manager, and I'm saying, right, Tilly, this is the situation we've got. This is what I think we should do. I'm coming to you with an answer. I'm giving you the situation. I'm coming to you with an answer. If I come to you and say, Tilly, I've got a problem, fix it with me, which employee are you more likely going to support and trust?
The first one.
Exactly. Government's the same. Right. Let's quickly go over some tips if you are feeling overwhelmed, people. This is just basically to touch upon an article that I wrote a couple of weeks back. Everyone listening to this and watching it will have felt overwhelmed. I certainly make Tilly feel overwhelmed on a weekly basis. On a weekly basis on this podcast. On a serious note, though, I just want to give some tips that I offered the other week in the hope this will help you. I think there are kind of a few different areas in terms of what we can do to help, really, in terms of managing stress. And I've broken these down into 4 different areas. And you can find this article over on mysocialworknews.com. The article title is How to Stop Feeling Overwhelmed in Social Work. So I think there's 4 different areas. We can prioritise and organise. We can establish boundaries. We can seek support. And we can make sure that we support our own self-care and resilience. I'm going to break those down to 2 different points for each. So the first one, prioritise and organise. And just tell me what you feel about this. Prioritise and organise are broken down in 2 different areas. I think we can effectively time management. We can evaluate our tasks and responsibilities, identify those which are urgent and important, and prioritise them. We can use tools like what was in Kidland's Law on last week's podcast in terms of talking about that skill and how to use that. No, this week's podcast, we did that just before. So we can utilise school tools such as planners, apps, or lists to keep track of deadlines and appointments. And doing that can reduce feelings of being overwhelmed because we're using our time best. I think with that, when we are writing things down, I think it's very important to set realistic goals. And this is realistic goals being the key there. Understand you can't do everything at once. Set achievable goals for your day. Make them smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. Also do those on a day, week, and monthly basis. And I think breaking down your workload into bite-sized chunks can help you make steady progress without feeling overwhelmed. How does that sound, Tilly? Would you be less stressed if you could effectively manage your time and set realistic goals?
Yeah, and I think it's what I've learnt to do over time. Not quite as methodical as you. We work very differently on that. But yeah, I write a list and go through it and say, right, this has got to be done today. This is the number one task. And and as managers doing that for your team as well, I think that's a really important thing, and say, I will take the responsibility of the smaller, less urgent, less important tasks, and you crack on with the stuff that I'm saying is the most important, and I'll take that on as my responsibility, not yours.
Next thing to do is to establish boundaries, and you can do this with a work-life balance and professional boundaries. In terms of work-life balance, we've got to establish clear boundaries between personal and professional responsibilities. And I think we should be diligent about not allowing work to slip into our personal lives. If you say you're going to finish at 5, unless it's an immediate safeguarding issue. And just tell your employer, well, I couldn't work past this because I had to be home. What I would say on that one as well is don't let other people's working patterns influence your own. You sometimes get toxic team cultures where somebody works really late and works really early, and that can kind of be used to set the norm. I think that's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Professional boundaries are important too. Make sure you have those professional boundaries with clients, but also colleagues as well. It's very, very important to have empathy and compassion. It's also important to look after your colleagues, but you have to manage your own emotional well-being as well. Don't take on the burdens of your clients if you can avoid it. Difficult to do. We talked about PTSD earlier. It's very, very difficult. Sometimes you can't avoid doing that, but try to know what your limits are. And in particular, this is going to sound a bit cruel, listeners, but I think particularly be mindful of being exposed to too many colleagues who want to moan and complain, but don't want to do anything about it. Is that horrible of me to say?
No, it is vital. Oh, I think that was one of my columns once, what to do when your colleagues moan too much. Yeah. It's so important because be a radiator, not a drain, as I like to say.
The fourth aspect is do seek support when you need it, though. And you can do that through two ways: supervision and mentorship, and peer support. Obviously, supervision is very important, but you can also seek mentors in the workplace as well. We spoke about this a couple of weeks back about the importance of mentors. You can discuss cases, share experience, and look for feedback. Peer support's good as well. Build a network of colleagues and friends who understand the challenge of social work. And it's a unique challenge, social workers.
Yes.
And can provide that emotional support and practical advice. What I would say about peer support is be mindful that it works both ways. Don't just become the moaner. Don't just become the radiator. But seek people who you can have genuine, like we can tell you, we will both talk about social work. It doesn't feel like either is a draining or offloading onto the other. And I think those relationships are quite good when you have that with a colleague.
Yes.
The last set of skills I think are important to work on is self-care and resilience. You must incorporate self-care routines in your daily life. Now, listeners, everybody's self-care routine is different. I'll be playing World of Warcraft for 2 hours to wind down this evening. But other people will have very different things entirely. But essentially, you've got physical activities, hobbies, mindfulness, meditation, eating well, rest, spending time with friends and family. As we always say, Tilly, self-care is a necessity in our line of work. Yep. And the last thing you can do is you can also develop resilience. This comes back to what we were saying about earlier, really, which is we have to accept that social work is stressful. We have to.
Yeah.
And there is a duty, as you rightly pointed out, on us to develop resilience. And, like we were talking about, you find things easier now than you used to. Mm-hmm. I certainly do. I remember the first time that I was involved in children being removed from their family home. I found it incredibly difficult. Whereas now, still difficult, still incredibly difficult, but I don't lie in bed to wake all night thinking about it like I used to. Same as anything, the more you do it, you build it. It doesn't get easier, but you get stronger.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. Now, you can do lots of things there. You can practice being a more glass half full kind of person. You can look at flexibility. You can find meaning in your work. You can manage stress, like I was saying earlier, with those self-care practices. But you can make yourself stronger. Sometimes making yourself stronger actively involves you putting yourself in the fire. Sometimes to make yourself stronger, you have to seek out challenges and not shy from them. But those are the 4 areas. Just to go over them again, listeners. Prioritize and organize, establish boundaries, seek support, and practice self-care and resilience. How does that sound, Tilly? Are those things that you would find helpful if you applied them in your life? Or if you have?
Yeah, definitely. I think they're very 4 valid points. As one of the social workers in my team like to say, Joe, shout out to Joe, amazing social worker. We've got hands, not wands.
Hands, I like that. Do you want pinching that of you? I'm pinching that. I like that.
It's become our little team motto. Hands, not wands. Hands, not wands. There's only so much I can do, and I'm not going to beat myself up for taking on system pressures when actually I can't. I can only do my best. And my best isn't going to cut into my own life or my own time or resilience. I will do my absolute best while I'm at work, while I'm on the clock. I'll fight for what I can, but there is a limit. I'm not a magician.
And there's only so much we can do today, and there is a limit to this podcast as well, listeners. So, until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.